Hey guys, JC Smith here. Today is part 2 on the F150. So we got it apart yesterday, we diagnosed it if you haven't caught that, but let's get a look at the interior. Let's see what it looks like today. See where she's at. Oh yeah, what a nice job. Let's see. You guys remember from the previous video, this was all stained up with coffee and drinks, and so was all this and all that. She's not done yet. This was round 1. She does it, a couple times anyways. Yeah, look at that. She's got that all. It's not dry yet either, so some still may show back up, but I need to get the doors open so that we get some air in here today. We had to close it up last night. You can see you got some, maybe it won't show up, but there's some moisture on the windows trapped in here, so we'll get this opened up so it can dry out. The last thing we want is it to be musty. Oh yeah, she got that out. Looks like most of that ink pen come out, not all of it, but she does a really nice job. So let's get these doors open for her. Alright, so let's do a recap. For those of you who didn't catch the first part of this, here comes that wind again. We got storms blowing in today, thunderstorms all day. Alright, so here's the recap. Bought the truck, liked it, knew it had a running problem, had an engine miss, and in a 5.4 you don't take an engine miss lightly, and I didn't. I bought it with the intentions that I may have to put an engine in it. So that's worst case scenario, and the price I paid was according. That's I feel like for what I got, knowing this has an engine problem in the condition of vehicle, I think I'm okay. So the first thing we did was ran codes. Our codes were 2 lean codes, and they were in memory, and had 2 lean codes and 1 for an O2 sensor stuck. Alright, so the first thing I did was a contribution test, and we saw that the number 1 cylinder had a negative contribution, so we found that. We took that apart, checked for coil, checked for spark at the coil, checked for injector pulse. We had both. Next thing I did was pull the spark plug out. That's when we found the bad plug. Let's see if that's up here. There we go. Alright, so then we found this spark plug. So obviously something happened. And also when I went to take it apart, when I pulled the oil fill cap off, the engine stalled because all the engine vacuum was being contained in the engine itself, in the crankcase. So what that led me to believe was we had a either bent valve or broken valve, broken piston, something along those natures, but it had to be something with the intake because it was letting vacuum go into the engine. Okay, so we took it apart, and what we find? We found cam followers. We found a broken cam follower, a damaged cam lobe, damaged lash adjuster, and the fact that the valve was missing. Now, we also found that all these timing components are new. Now, we don't know if we're going to be able to fix this engine. So let me finish on this timing component. So we have to consider, or keep in mind, I guess is a better way to put it. Everything we're doing is trying to find out what happened, because when you find out, if you can find out what happened, it's much easier to get the problem so it doesn't happen again and you don't miss anything. Kind of tough to do on these because you don't know which came first. Now, speculating, it could have been the cam follower broke and that started all this. Okay, that's very common. This happens a lot. Or that the bearing in this one let loose and that started it. Who knows? We can't tell. What we do know is, let's see, what is that from? See, this is a piece we fished out of there. Oh, that's the top of the lash adjuster. That's what it is. It ripped that apart. Okay, so the lash adjuster, we believe, fell down into the oil pan. Now, the speculation could be those parts failed, or was it, this is a new VVT solenoid, and all these timing components are new. Or was it that the guy who did all the work didn't get the timing right? And when he started up, it smacked the valve and caused all this problem. So, we don't know. But we don't know if the engine's savable. Now, being that intake valve fell into the cylinder and has been bouncing around and beating itself apart, the likeliness, since that intake is open and it's sucking vacuum through, that shrapnel that was in that piston is probably through all the other cylinders as well. So when we take this apart, the likeness that the heads are no good or beyond use is pretty high. So we don't know. And the fact that tops of the pistons could be damaged, not only that, just cylinder walls and all that. So we won't know what this really is until we get it apart. Now, in the way of being thorough, we're going to pull all the plugs out. We're going to do a compression test on every single cylinder. That way we know the condition of the rings also. The valves aren't such a big deal because the heads are going to be off. We have to pull the oil pan to get the pieces out of it and to check the rod bearings and main bearings and all that stuff. Basically, I just need to know that the rings are actually okay, the cylinder walls are, that the cylinder is actually able to make compression. Okay, we should be seeing somewhere hopefully above 150 psi on this engine. So that's where we're headed next. I'm going to get the compression tester, get all the spark plugs out, and we're going to run this thing over and see what we can get. So stick around, we'll bring you along. I'm getting some of these brackets out of here, and you know, everything's like an investigation on this stuff, right? Everything we do, we're just trying to, it's another piece of the puzzle, right? And everything I'm taking apart is loose. The stuff that's difficult to get to, yeah, it's, at best, it's finger tight. Now, we know that this has been apart recently because of the new pieces in it under the timing cover, all those new timing pieces. However, you know, you're wondering, the whole time I'm doing this, it's, the thought never leaves your mind about, you know, what happened. And when you get to where you have all these things that are very loose, you just wonder, you know, do we have just a DIY repair here went wrong? Which, you know, we've all been there. But you'd like to think that this wasn't from a repair facility, you know, an actual shop that did this work, because there's, you know, typical stuff you see DIY guy, like the looms that are pulled out of the tabs, those little push pins that hold the loom around, you know, that are taped to the loom there. They're all ripped loose here and there, and I'll have to fix that. You know, silicone in weird places that shouldn't be. These valve cover gaskets are a rubber, and there's only RTV belongs in one place, or two places on each side. But I don't know. You know, it's just the things you get to, and it's always the telltale signs of someone who, you know, lacks the ability or the want to do it correctly and, you know, see it through. Like, you know, with any of these new engines, the devil's in the details, right? It's got to be done right. It's precision work. It's not a small block Chevy anymore. You know? Small block Chevy, good lord, what, you didn't torque the heads, you used an impact, yeah, okay, it's gonna run. You know, it's not a big deal. Everything today is far more sophisticated. I'm gonna shut up now and get back to work here, because I'll just fill this video full of me chatting and no real work getting done, and we don't want that. Look at that, sweating already. 7:30 in the morning. It's a little warm out today. It's supposed to hit 90 something, and it's humid because we got storms coming in again. Supposed to have thunderstorms all day. So, and I didn't put this in the shop. I was doing it outside. So let me get at it here. So whenever possible, when I have to pull heads out of, or spark plugs out of an aluminum head, what I'll do is, if I have the time, I will crack all the spark plugs loose, and then once I know all of them have cracked loose, I'll take a little PB blaster and spray it down in that hole and let it soak overnight. Is, you know, my favorite, but as long as I possibly can. I don't know if it helps or not, but as of today, I haven't. They've come out easier. I don't want to say what I was going to say, but it seems like it's been successful for me to get them out. So I do this, break them all loose, soak them overnight, and I don't know if it actually does anything or not, but it's worked. So we'll continue with it. And then I just use, this is just a spark plug threading tool. You stick it down in there on the plug, finish backing it out. I think I'm down far enough. Yeah, it's not fitting on there. I think I got oil down inside there from that Lincoln. I don't think it's going to let me pull these out. Yeah, it's going to pull that one. Alright, so this is what we're finding on all of these plugs. Get it over here where it's easier to see. And they're all showing some oil. But they're all, the same. So, that's what I expected. I mean, we're sucking oil all the way through here. So, alright, I've got all the spark plugs out now. So, get my compression tester set up and we will do a compression test, see what we got. I guess it's worth noting that there was no other damage to any other spark plugs, so that's good. That gives me a little bit of hope that we haven't had a lot of metal transfer from that one cylinder all through the rest of the engine, so that's one positive sign right there. Okay, we're ready. This is the Super Duty 5.4 and 4.6 and 6.8 compression tester. It has these. I can't remember what size these are, 16mm and 14mm threads, special threads just for the Super Duties, and then your regular compression tester, the 14mm just screws into it. So, these don't need to be tight, they need to be snug, enough to seal it, and that's it right there. Alright, let me get it going. So we are in the driver's side front. Now it's important to have the battery up good so we get good continuous rotations in the same consistency throughout all the cylinders. Let's see what we got. It's pretty good. What are we going to call that? 170? I'm good with that. I can hear something over here under the valve cover, like we may have, another failed follower, but alright, we'll call that one 170. We'll write that down. We'll get the next second one back on the driver's side. We're going to call that 175. That's the third one back driver's side, 170. Just under 170. We'll call that 160. 165. Close enough. Alright. Last one on the driver's side. What is it? 165. We'll call it 165. Back on the passenger side, so that is 170. Okay, third back on the driver's side. Call that 170. And we're going to call that 170. That's the final all the way back on the passenger side. Now, if you notice, I didn't do number 1. Obviously that would be pointless, but you'll notice there was only 7 gauges in there, or 7 tests in there. Obviously number 1's not going to make any compression. We can't close the intake off. So now what that means to us is, at least at this point, all those cylinders, the other ones, are able to make compression. So the likeliness of being able to save this engine is getting a little bit better, but we won't know till we take it apart and see what happens. So that's done. Now I'm going to start getting the intake off, get the other valve cover off, and start disassembly. So next you'll see me, I'll have this intake off and the valve cover, and we'll inspect the other side. Okay, so there's another step worth mentioning here. At this point, I would typically, while I had that hose in each cylinder, or I just go back over, I would put air to the cylinders and do a leak down test on every single cylinder. And basically what I'm doing is putting air in the cylinder, and I would move the engine over until the valves were closed for that cylinder, and then see if the cylinder holds air, and if not, if it escapes, and where it goes. That would give me an idea of a little bit more information on the internal condition of the valves and the seats and all that. Being that this already has damage, and I'm suspect we may have damage on the other side, there's no need to do that because I'm going to take that head off. If I was trying to avoid taking this head off, I would most certainly, the next step I would do is I would take, and I would put air in the cylinders, take that valve cover off, do each cylinder, leak down test, and then I'd take my camera. I've got a little 5mm camera that can fit down that spark plug hole, and I would do my best. It's got a light on the end of it, and actually has an attachment with a mirror, so that instead of just shooting straight down, it'll hit the mirror and you can look at the cylinder walls and the valves and all that. Now, it's very, very time consuming to use that because you can't see the picture very well, but that's not going to take place here because we are going to take this head off. At the very least, we're taking the heads off. We know the oil pan's got to come off, and I'm telling you things I already told you, so back to work we go. A couple little tricks, tips, something you might be interested in. If you got to do a compression test on a Ford truck, I can tell you my experience has been from at least 99 up in the Super Duties, and I don't know what year in the F150s, excursions, all that stuff, but anyways, Ford puts a disconnect here. It's always by the battery, and this is the actual line. Take this connector loose here. It's a squeeze. You just squeeze the two sides of it and pull it out. Alright, and there's always, this is the starter line. This goes to the solenoid. So you can put your jumper wire in here and just hit it to the positive of your battery terminal, and you can crank the engine over. You don't have to have a second person. I use a push button, a momentary push button, and it has a light on it. And when you hook it to here and you hook it into here, the resistance in the windings of the solenoid, okay, is enough to turn a light on, so you know you have a good signal. And you can just take and push the button. You can do what you got to do, and you don't have to have two people. You can see everything that's going on. Works pretty well. Another thing I do on Ford trucks is, I don't know if you can see that. You see that white cap down there, right down there? That's the antifreeze drain. Now, if you just open that up, it just pours antifreeze everywhere. So I put a hose on it and drop it into my drain pan. Be prepared, it takes forever to drain out that way, but it's a lot less mess. I could probably shorten up the hose a little bit, but it is what it is. I usually get that stuff draining while I'm doing other stuff so that it's drained by the time I'm ready. Another thing is you can make as many air openings, like I've got the reservoir open, and this is that cap I put on, and which I just dropped, but I'll find it. There it is. You know, you open it up and it helps to let it flow. It's that whole suction thing. But you know, just a couple little tips for you. Alright, it's time to unhook that fuel line right there, and you see it's a spring clamp deal. Got too much in my hands. Ford's glorious spring clamps. Actually, the fuel I don't mind so much as them air conditioners. For whatever reason, they're just a pickle. Must be the aluminum, and I don't know. I don't like them. Alright, so this is what I use. You can use these. You can use the clamshells, the ones that are spring operated, that open up and cover the whole thing. If you don't know what that is, you can see them online. You just put it on there, shove the thing back till you hear it click, and watch for the spray. Oh, no spray. Alright, bled off good. Alright then, so that's that. And yeah, it's pretty cheap little set. I don't know, these are like 10, 12 bucks. You can get them at about any parts store. They're made by Lyle, where these ones are. And they fit. I've used them on GM, Ford, whatever. Look at that. Touch one of them rubber vacuum lines with that coating on it. Get my delicate, fragile hands cleaned up here. I think I need to get me one of those nice, cozy, air-conditioned shops like Mr. Heavy Chevy has. Boy, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Could you imagine working on this stuff? Nice air-conditioned garage. He's even got a refrigerator, man. That's pretty neat. I'd like to have a refrigerator in my garage. Then I could have, well, that's probably a bad idea. I can smell that battery starting to get a little toasty. I don't know how to plug that. It's probably a bad idea if I had a refrigerator in my garage, because I'd fill it full of good stuff. You know, like, ice cream sandwiches and drumsticks and popsicles, and in the freezer, of course. That'd be kind of nice. Much nicer on a cold day, eh? But I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think that's gonna happen at all, quite honestly. Sure sounds good. I think Mr. Heavy Chevy has ice cream in his too. Anybody else out there got a refrigerator in their garage with all kinds of delectables in there? You know, the majority of my life I've worked on everything we needed fixed outside, and I rarely work inside. I don't like how, quite honestly, I dropped the bolt. You know, I don't like how dark it is in the shop. I don't have the shop set up the way I want, and maybe someday I will, but it's just not a priority today. You know, it's not insulated. There's no real good lights up there. I have temporary construction lights up just so I can have light, but it's not ideal. That is for certain. But it's not a priority today, but it's not cold. You wait until it gets cold and you watch to see who's crying like a little baby about how cold it is in that garage. And then he'll do something. Alright, so we're removing the intake, and there's some tips here that may be beneficial to you. One is, there's a wiring harness that runs across the back of this intake, and it goes right here, if you can see that. Probably not showing up well. There's a stud right here. I put the nut back on. There's a wiring harness that bolts to that, and it's very difficult to get to. So I take the intake loose, lift it up, slide it forward, and then you can get to the rest of the wiring harness that's still connected. There is, oh, if I can get to it over there, there's another wiring harness and another vacuum line. Now the vacuum line I was thinking about on this 5.4 that may have been leaking is way down here in the valley. You see that vacuum line? Now that one looks like it was on. Doesn't look like it was off. You can see how clean it is at the very edge there, like it was on the intake. Now it goes right there. So this is less than easy to get on. Oh, looky there. Got us a little mouse nest in there. Found him a home. I guess we're gonna have to evict him. If he ain't paying rent, he ain't staying. That's how that's gonna work. So I got a few more things over here to disconnect. Maybe I'll just take you over there and show you. But don't get too wound up but about getting that intake off. It's just, you just gotta go into it calm and cool, you know. But you can see I got just a few more things to unplug, but it's so much easier after you get the intake out. Now to get the intake out, I take the alternator and that crossover tube out, and it just makes things so much simpler. So give me a couple seconds, I'll have that intake off. Alright, now you see how much more space you have to work. Now this valve cover becomes a little easier, the timing cover isn't exactly easier, but there's more room, you can breathe. You know, after this little bit of renovation here we did by removing that intake, makes life a lot simpler. Now, I believe this has been apart before because the two wires coming into the valley here were wired, the wires were routed incorrectly. So I think the intake's been off. It looks like these could be original head gaskets. You can see this tab here. I've seen that on the originals. I've never seen it aftermarket. That doesn't mean it's not. It just means that it still could be original. But yeah, look at all the oil that's been sucking up through here. You know, this is number one here, so it's obviously got the most oil. But look where the gas is sprayed and kept it clean on the injector. Interesting to say the least. I'll stuff rags down in here and blow everything out again before I take the other valve cover off. You know, I know that we're taking the motor down, but we want to avoid any possibility of anything falling in, or dirt, or tools, or bolts, or any of that stuff. So we will fill these things full of rags, all the intake runners. When they're cleaner, I just take duct tape and go from one end to the other, get a couple layers on, make sure it sticks good. But there's so much oil on that I'll spend more time cleaning all that up for the tape to stick than if I just stuff rags in it. So that's it. Let's get on to driver's side valve cover. Let's see what kind of mayhem's under there. Well, here it is. We'll inspect it together. Alright, we got some wear here that we don't really like. You see that dull right in the middle? We'll be suspecting some cam followers here. I don't see any kicked out. They all look to be in place. Get that light out of my eyeballs. Yep. They're all in place. However, I certainly do not like the look on the lobes of those cams. I'm going to get in here closer so you can see what I'm talking about. See the wear mark? And what I think that is the, and I could be wrong, but I think it is, you can see it pretty clear on this one here. You can see where the roller looks like it's starting to leave its metal on the cam. Well, I gotta tell you, I would be very leery of putting another set of followers on that cam. And I might be wrong, but yeah, look at that. That looks like metal transfer is what that looks to me. And if you look at that roller, that sucker's bad. That sucker's bad. Yeah, so, oh boy, there's one right there. Look at that. I bet you that one's ready to kick out of there. Is it ground off? You guys see that in the picture better than I can. Looks like that bearing's going on that one. Oh, there's a broken one. Is it broken? Man, so hard to see. Let's might get a light in there. Can't tell if it's broken or a shadow. Looks like it's just a shadow. And yeah, but anyhow, I sure don't like that last lobe right there. That's a lot of metal transfer right there, I think. So the cams, it's like it's at a point we probably could, we're still okay with the motor, but it'll have to have a couple cams, or I don't know if they'd regrind these cams or not. They're probably so close to maximum that you wouldn't be able to. Plus, it probably costs as much as new ones. I think I saw new ones for about $150 a piece. No cam phasers, of course. You know, this is something else that kind of surprised me. If you had the valve cover off and you did cam phasers and you did all this nice work in here, why in the world did you not change that? I mean, obviously that seal's been leaking too, so that needs replaced, but anyhow, you know, just one of those things. Just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I understand some people on a budget, but man, if you look at the amount of work it takes to get that valve cover off, I would not want to take that off again for $40, because that's about what that costs, you know, roughly. You can get them as low as 40 bucks I've seen, but the ones I bought last time were a little bit more than that, but not a whole lot. I think it was like 120 for the pair, but interesting. So this side, so the next thing I need to do is disable the fuel system, pull the fuse out for it, since we got that fuel line disconnected, because I don't want fuel spraying everywhere. And we're going to crank this thing over, and we're going to see how it oils. Make sure that we got good oil coming everywhere up here, because that'll be the next thing. We don't want to go through all this work and then find out later that, you know, there's an insufficient oil up here, and that's why we have roller failure, because it looks like we have some type of metal transfer all the way across. And if you look, I don't know if this will show up, the farther we get away from the oil pump, the worse the metal transfer looks. Let's see if I can set this up, you can see. So we would be kind of looking at the, you know, possibility we could have low oil pressure. You see how the rear one's really bad, and they're getting, if the camera would focus, they're getting less, and then they're about the same up through here. So I don't know. That's what we need to do next. We need to give it a crank over before we, you know, disrupt any timing or anything like that. We're gonna roll the thing over and let's see what kind of oil pressure it has. It showed good oil pressure on the gauge, but in most cases Fords are just idiot lights. Once they reach a certain PSI, they just take the gauge and go right to the center. They're not an actual graduated gauge. It's an idiot light setup basically with a gauge. So it may be in the middle, but that means it met the minimum requirements that Ford, the ECM or the cluster has to see to turn on. That's all. So makes the switch hit a on or off position basically is what it's like. But anyhow, let me get this all set up. Let me get my remote starter on here, and we'll see what we got.